Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock Blog, and I'm doing another late night movie review. This time I'm going to be reviewing Heaven and Hell, a Chang Cheh film released in 1978 by Shaw Brothers. This is a weird movie. That's just, and this review will have spoilers, by the way, but this is a strange, strange film. I avoided it for a long time because I had heard a lot of bad things about it, mostly about the budget and weirdness with the plot and people saying things like the director was unhappy with it. He didn't like the final version, or he had issues during making the film. I don't know. I just heard all kinds of things that made me say I don't know if I should watch that. And I will say this is not like any other Chang Cheh film that I've ever seen. This is like the One-Armed Swordsman, the Assassin, Five Deadly Venoms, Five Element Ninjas. Any movie that I can think of off the top of my head from him, they all kind of there's a vibe to them. There's a level of quality to them that's consistent. This does not feel like any of those movies at all. This feels not like it's done by another director, but maybe that he's just trying to do way different things and either experimenting boldly and making really strange choices, or throwing his hands up in frustration and just doing the directorial equivalent of throwing a tantrum. But I was kind of enchanted by this movie when I was watching it, and I think before I get into sort of the plot and all that stuff, I think that deserves a little bit of an explanation. Like I said, there's a lot of cheap sets. This is a genre mesh of things. Some aspects of this film feel like a West Side Story. Some feel like a mythic fantasy film. Some feel like a Hong Kong action movie. Some feel like a wuxia movie. There's just all these different elements just sort of thrown in and blended together. And I think that's number one. That's by design. But it's a lot like watching Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory or Flash Gordon or any of these films that have very unusual aesthetics and maybe not the most convincing sets in the world or the most convincing costuming and effects. And I think when you see something like that, when you watch a movie where the sets are either really bad or either really not convincing, or the effects aren't terribly convincing, you're either going to kind of just be like, well, no thank you, or you're going to, if you do allow yourself to get pulled in, you're going to have a very different experience from being immersed in a movie that has very good effects and perfect orchestra soundtrack and all kinds of the bells and whistles that are going to just naturally pull you in. It's a little bit more like being a child again and being I don't know, just sort of giving in to the experience of hearing somebody tell a fairy tale or watching a really small stage production of a play. That kind of experience just feels different. It's not the same quality of immersion, and it's almost dream state like. So again, I liken this to like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's that kind of psychedelic immersion, I guess you would call it. It just does something. It triggers something different in your brain when you're watching a movie like this. And that said, I think a lot of people are going to watch this and be like, "That's total crap." And I think that's fair if people feel that way when watching it. But I didn't feel that way. I felt, number one, a lot of the minimalist like set pieces and stuff felt intentional. So there's one scene that takes place in on modern day Earth, and it's supposed to be near a fountain or something like that. And instead of just going to a fountain and filming, it looks like they had a stage, and they have like an obviously fake fountain and like nothing else. And then all of the bad guys, instead of coming in and fighting like normal, they come in. I might even just be adding this in, but I swear to God, they were like snapping their fingers in together in time and then attacking in sequence, and it just looked like a dance. It looked. I mean, and sometimes martial arts movies will have a dance like quality to them, but I mean, this literally looked like a dance, and it felt like a musical. the rest of the movie didn't feel that way, but this one moment did. And you get stuff like that in this film all the time, where it's just radically departing from where you were a moment before, and it's like being locked in a dream. And to me, that I like that experience in movies. That's why, and again, this is a movie that does it at a much different level, but Ashes of Time was one of my favorite films. And this is nothing like Ashes of Time. If you like Ashes of Time, I don't think you will like this movie. But for me, it just kind of had that same surreal, dreamy effect. So I think that, just to explain sort of what my experience was with the movie, that was the level that I was enjoying this on. That kind of, like if you're watching a movie late night, like 2 a.m., and your brain is kind of highly open to suggestion and maybe on the border of sleep, it's a really weird experience, and I enjoy that sometimes. And so it really reminded me of my first time watching Flash Gordon. That was the closest comparison I could draw. And again, it's a really weird genre mesh. I'll get a little bit into that when I do my recap. And again, this is a late night review, so I apologize if I'm meandering, if I'm a little groggy, but this is for me at least, this is late, and so I tend to kind of go on. But the film itself, it's set in this is a weird storyline. It begins in heaven. And by heaven, I mean the celestial bureaucracy. So with the Jade Emperor and, these celestial magistrates and that sort of thing. The main character is a guard there. There's a couple that are, there's like a woman who's like a maid to the Queen of Heaven or something. And there's a guy, I don't remember what his position was. But they fall in love. She gets in trouble for something. I think she drops a plate. And she's going to be punished, and they end up trying to flee together to go to Earth and escape from heaven so that they can just be a couple. As they're trying to flee, the guard who's in charge of protecting the gate is trying to stop them, but he's friends with the guy, and he's basically righteous, so he doesn't want to interfere with this this love that's occurring, so he lets them go. And he ends up getting punished. They send him to Earth as punishment. And on Earth, he becomes a taxi driver. And I should say the Earth sequence of this movie is the strangest by far. Like the whole movie's odd. But the Earth sequence is where you have these really minimalist set pieces and, these sort of veers into musical territory and things like that. And that's where it just kind of gets really weird. And that's interesting because that really should be the most mundane section of the film. The first part takes place in heaven, the third part in hell, the second part takes place in earth, yet it's the strangest. So I found that interesting. Anyways, he encounters another couple that's also having difficulties, and this time it's because of a crime lord. It's kind of it feels like very much like a Bruce Lee movie meets West Side Story. He helps the couple, but he gets shot in the process. He dies and he goes to hell. And then in hell, he has to appear before the magistrate of hell, who, because in the books it says that he's there for gambling or something, so he sends him to go be with the gamblers, and with the gamblers, they're all sort of gambling around tables, and anytime they lose a hand, they have to get their fingers chopped off, and then their fingers magically grow back, and then they go back to gambling, and it's like this endless cycle. And so, he feels that he's here unjustly, so he tries to escape. During his journey in hell, he meets a woman named Red Dress, who has her own story about how she got here, and she originates from Earth, not from heaven like him. And so, they try to escape together. They their paths sort of, depart and intersect, and then they finally rejoin at another section of hell where the compassionate Buddha happens to be passing through. Apparently, he does these regular rounds through hell, and he hears their story, and he agrees to help them, and says that he's gonna put this guy together with a group of 4 other righteous men that have been wrongly condemned, and that if they fight their way through hell, they can reincarnate when they escape. And so it's not like a sure thing. They're not just being lifted out of hell, but if they fight their way through, they can, they got a chance of reincarnating again. And so it's an interesting concept. And the team that he assembles is a hodgepodge of characters from all different kinds of martial arts movies. So one of the guys is like clearly a Bruce Lee type character, and I think Lo Meng is in the movie, but I think he's the one who plays this character, and he's really good for it. It's a really, but it just feels very Bruce Lee to me. This character. Another guy is like a wuxia guy, and they're from all different styles of martial arts movies. So it's kind of a nice, configuration when they put the final team together. Now the guard has to go and find these guys. Then when he finds them, they fight their way through. And I won't tell you exactly what happens, but it's a really interesting final battle. The whole movie's very, very interesting. I mean, I love the idea. I like the journey from heaven down into hell, and then back into the cycle of reincarnation. I liked the fight sequences. It's got a great cast of actors. So I mean, there's Philip Kwok, Alexander Fu, Lo Meng, lots of people that you'll recognize, and people if you don't even if you don't know their names, you'll recognize their faces. It's that kind of a movie, and again, but the weird thing is, like I said, there's these really sort of cheap looking set pieces, particularly in the Earth sequence, but also during the Heaven sequence. But then they have these other parts of the film where the sets look incredible. In Hell, I thought the sets looked pretty good. The makeup didn't look so great, but again, this is 1978, so I've seen a lot of movies from that era that have bad makeup, and that doesn't really affect me. It's not the worst I've seen, but it's certainly not the best. And the Hell sequences are really unusual, and very. Like there are scenes of guys being cut in half and their bodies have to fight. The two halves have to fight each other. They have a section in there for gossips and their tongues are just being pulled out, forever. Stuff like that. I think there was like a merchant who had to just endlessly swallow molten gold. So it's a lot of like little interesting things, and these are all going on in the background as the character is trying to escape. And there are demons and ghosts and all kinds. And by demons, like I mean more like Raksha type demons. But anyways, yeah, it was a very very surreal, strange movie. I think a lot of people are going to see it and have very different reactions because of that juxtaposition of like when they really go bare bones with these set pieces. It's really minimalist. I mean, like it looks like it's on a stage with a couple of objects, and when they're doing that, they tend to do really strange things. Like the villain in the Earth sequences, for the most part, he doesn't talk. I think at one point he has a conversation with somebody, but he's mainly doing like silent movie type poses. And there's a lot of sections where there really isn't much dialogue, where it's just kind of it's really unusual. And a lot of the film kind of again sort of jumps around like that. So, but I found it, like I said, very dreamlike, and I enjoy that in a film. And I liked the way that they mashed the genres together. I mean, this is basically a multi-genre movie, and the idea for taking you there is a very interesting one. You sort of start in heaven, where you have this mythic plot line, and then you go to Earth, where it's sort of a West Side Story, gangster, martial arts thing. Then they go to hell, and they have all these possibilities open to them. So he meets So like one of the martial heroes that he meets when he assembles the team is like a Taekwondo guy. And that guy ends up, and each of the guys basically relates their story. And so you find out why they were sent to hell, and they were all kind of unjustly killed and then unjustly punished. I used to do Taekwondo. So the scene with the Taekwondo guy, he ends up with his hands tied behind his back by criminals, and he's fighting them with his kicks. And the Lo Meng one is great. I think Philip Kwok is one of the other heroes, and he's sort of the wuxia character, and I thought his was interesting. But it's just I don't know. It really brought a lot of different kinds of experiences to the table. But it is probably the most unusual movie I've seen in a long time, and I understand why a lot of people didn't like it. I just found that my reaction to it was mostly positive. I enjoyed watching it. I was constantly sort of questioning, well, is this an intentional choice, or is this something that was forced upon them by budget? Or was it a combination of both? Maybe they knew the budget was a certain way, so they're like, well, we're gonna go the extreme and uh, and really go minimalist on this set. Whatever the case, it's all very striking. And I think even if you don't end up liking this film, it's worth watching because I suspect you'll be interested in your reaction to it. Um, just know that it's a very weird movie with very again, it's not typical Chang Cheh. It's not what you expect to see. So it's unique in that sense, and so it's probably worth watching just for that fact. If you're a Chang Cheh fan, you're not going to come to this and see the deadly venoms. It's not that type of movie, though. There are a lot of the venoms in here, um, but you're just you're gonna have a much different experience than you would with his other movies, um, and I think it's worth checking out. I would say don't be like me. I didn't watch this movie for a while because of what I heard about it. Don't read the reviews. I mean, I know you're listening to mine, so I'm already coloring your impression, but don't go out there and allow that to influence you. Just watch the film, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. Um, but I think it's worth checking out just because it's an unusual movie. It's a very very unusual movie. When I heard about it, I was picturing this kind of sort of fish out of water story for some reason. So I was picturing something like, there's like a celestial hero who ends up trapped on Earth, and it's kind of like a silly scenario. This was nothing like that. This was a very 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 cool plot line. Even if the sets and stuff doesn't work for you, I think you have to concede that the plot line uh, is very clever in a lot of ways. It's just a question of whether the execution works, in my opinion, and obviously the pacing might not be to everybody's taste because it spends a long time before it really gets to that section where the heroes are assembled and have to fight their way out. And I think to some people that might feel sudden. I don't mind that. I like movies that don't necessarily feel like they have a standard structure to them. So to me this was enjoyable. And then I've rambled for too long. I think what am I? I'm going on 20 minutes already, which I don't know. It usually means it's going to be a horrible review. So if you didn't enjoy this one, I apologize. But I'm trying to keep these at 12 minutes or less. So again, Heaven and Hell, 1978. Chang Cheh. I enjoyed it. It's very surreal, dreamlike. Um, and again, I really have to compare it to stuff like Willy Wonka and Flash Gordon. I really had that vibe to it for me. So I will let you go, and until next time, I'll see you later. I'm gonna be reviewing The Sentimental Swordsman. Uh, this is a movie that I've seen plenty before, but I decided to read a fan translation of it, you know, and watch it, and so that I could kind of get a sense of how the book might affect my impression of the movie, which I already have an idea of. So I've been reading The Sentimental Swordsman. I watched the movie when I was about 100 pages in. The translation I have is like 800 pages. So when I get to the end of that, I'm going to watch it again, and then I'm going to do a review based on both the movie and the book, because I'm getting a little more open to some of these fan translations where I might have been more closed to them before, and I'm going to see how those affect my viewing experience of films that I've maybe already seen but haven't read, and have one opinion of, see if it changes, and that's what I'm trying to do here. So anyways, I will let you go and talk to you later.